know the people around you. You may think you can spot a toxic presence, sense heavy energy, or recognize when someone crosses a line, yet the real threat is rarely obvious. The most damaging individuals often appear charming, helpful, familiar, even members of your own family. While you guard against blatant villains, you may be unlocking the door of your mind to something far subtler. Another person's unconscious spilling into yours. Carl Jung spent his life mapping these hidden exchanges. In the ego and the unconscious, he shows that most of what truly governs us lies outside conscious awareness. That truth doesn't apply only to you, it applies to everyone, and therein lies the danger. A person blind to their own darkness lets that darkness wander. It seeks a host, and far too often, that host becomes you. Pause and recall. How many times have you felt emotionally drained after a simple conversation? How often have you been blamed for a problem that wasn't yours, or cast as rescuer in a drama you never wrote? Jung named this projection, an unconscious tactic by which someone unloads onto you what they refuse to face within themselves. From that moment, you stop being a person and become a symbol, an imagined enemy, an idealized savior, a walking mirror. All these images share one fact: none are truly you. Worse, you may not notice the switch. You believe you're being kind, mature, supportive. Meanwhile, you sink into a psychic swamp that is not your own, trying to solve turmoil that never belonged to you, entangled in forces you did not create, yet now steer you. And the culprits aren't always scheming villains. Jung warned, the gravest threats rarely come from conscious wrongdoing. They arise from unintegrated psyches, people ruled by masks, complexes, and repressed desires. Such individuals aren't evil, they're dangerous, and their danger is quiet. It drifts in through casual remarks, half-joking accusations, pregnant silences, until you begin doubting your own reality. Lose that inner footing, and you become a living fragment of their shadow. Perhaps you feel this right now, in a romance, a friendship, an office, even at your own dinner table. Maybe you're blaming yourself, asking, what's wrong with me? The answer? Nothing. The problem is how neatly you're being used as a vessel for another's unconscious life. In this discussion, we will expose 6 emotional archetypes Jung would flag as hazardous, not because they plan harm, but because unseen forces move through them. Drawing on Aion, the ego and the unconscious, and archetypes and the collective unconscious, we'll learn to spot each profile. More unsettling, we'll consider that one, or several, might live in us as well. Take a steady breath and proceed. After this, you won't look at others or at yourself in quite the same way. Picture sharing a home with someone who blames you for every feeling that ripples through their body. Your very presence becomes a trigger. You are held liable for emotions you never sparked. In the beginning, they appear delicate, soulful, deep. Yet slowly you notice you are fighting on a battlefield that was never yours, and you are already pinned down. This is the unconscious manipulator, a person oblivious to their own wounds, projecting those wounds onto others for psychic survival. Jung warned, what we do not confront in ourselves we will meet as fate. Too often that fate has a familiar face and a seat at your table. The unconscious manipulator is driven by repressed memories, unintegrated traumas, and half-processed feelings. Instead of looking inward, they turn you into the canvas on which their turmoil plays out. Projection, Jung wrote, is an unavoidable psychic function, yet left unexamined, it becomes lethal. In the ego and the unconscious, he calls projection a psychic blindness that traps the projector in a cell of their own making. The other person is no longer perceived as they are, but used as a stand-in for what the projector refuses to see. So they don't truly see you. They see a lost fragment of themselves and react as though that fragment were real. These people inhabit the permanent posture of a victim. Anger? You provoked it. Sadness? You let them down. Their feelings of inferiority. Clearly you think you're better. The distortion seeps in so quietly that you begin doubting yourself. Was I insensitive? Did I cross a line? Am I the toxic one? Thus manipulation unfolds. No shouting, no explicit demands. Pure, wordless efficiency. To complicate matters, unconscious manipulators are often magnetic, charismatic, sensitive, wrapped in emotional intensity. That charisma is a snare. You believe you can help, heal, understand them better than anyone. In practice, you offer up your own mental health, diving in to rescue someone who refuses to descend into their own depths. The harder you pull, the faster you drown. Jung cautioned that these projection patterns force us into symbolic roles: savior, enemy, traitor, replacement parent, anything but our genuine self. Living inside that symbolic bond is living in illusion. You are treated not as a subject, but as a warped reflection of another's unconscious. Protection begins with awareness. Detect the pattern, sever the invisible threads tying you to their story, and ask relentlessly, is this feeling actually mine, or was it planted? The unconscious manipulator slips in through empathy's doorway. Once you spot that entry, you must next confront their subtler disguise, the persona, the public mask they wear to pass as something they are not. In the next section, we'll explore the bearer of the persona and why Jung called this one of the greatest psychological risks we face, while the unconscious manipulator dumps their conflicts onto you. The person fused to a spotless mask can pull you into a life where even you forget who you really are. If this is resonating, hit subscribe and stay with the channel. Thanks for your support. Not every psychological danger comes from wild behavior. Sometimes it comes wrapped in perfection, the constant smile, the flawless posture, the immaculate image. We live in an age where seeming matters more than being, and for Jung, that was serious trouble. When someone over-identifies with their persona, the social mask we all wear to fit in, they risk cutting themselves off from their own core. Jung writes in The Ego and the Unconscious, the persona is not what a person is, but what he and others think he is. In small doses, the persona is useful. It lets us function as doctor, teacher, sibling, friend. The crisis begins when the mask sticks. Everything spontaneous, vulnerable, and real gets locked in the basement of the psyche. The bearer of the persona becomes a master of polished superficiality. They say what people want to hear, behave correctly, dodge conflict at any cost. Yet behind this curtain of control lies a soul in ruins. The harder they hold the image together, the harder they strangle the authentic self. And repression always sends a bill. For those living with such a person, the impact runs deep. Something feels off, but you can't name it. Conversations lack heat, truth, depth. Every moment seems rehearsed. Worse, the persona bearer projects their perfectionism onto you. They expect you to perform, to keep the script intact, express raw emotion, doubt, or pain, and they retreat, because anything that reminds them of their buried self is intolerable. Jung warned that clinging to the persona threatens individuation, the lifelong process of integrating the unconscious. The real peril starts when someone is hypnotized by the role they play, convinced they are only what others see. Living for approval, praise, and recognition, they become a hostage to their own facade. Everything genuine suffocates beneath the veneer. Coexisting with a persona bearer soon makes you police your own spontaneity. You measure every word, tuck away pieces that don't fit the ideal story. Without noticing, you start wearing a mask too. Life beside such a person isn't just synthetic, it's contagious, yet the story gets darker. Feelings, thoughts, and desires can't be buried forever. They ferment in the unconscious, swelling into the shadow. Repressed long enough, that shadow bursts back with explosive force, dragging everyone nearby into far more dangerous territory, denied emotions returning as rage, sabotage, or breakdown. In the next section, we'll meet a different type, the keeper of the repressed shadow, someone who refuses to face their darker side until it finally erupts. Picture a person always controlled, polished, restrained, forever correct, forever polite. Behind this neat veneer sits a force ready to break loose. Everything they judge as wrong, ugly, or unacceptable gets stuffed into the basement of the soul. It isn't healed or transformed, only buried. That is the core of the keeper of the repressed shadow, a person determined to live in the light until ignored darkness seizes the wheel. Carl Jung spent much of his career studying this hidden territory. In Aion, he writes, "The shadow is everything about ourselves we refuse to recognize, yet it still insists on showing up." The shadow isn't the world's evil, the neighbor, or some outside enemy. It's internal. It's the hatred you won't admit, the envy you rationalize, the sexuality you suppress, the ambition you mask as humility. Whatever you reject in yourself never vanishes. It becomes shadow. And as Jung warned, what you do not make conscious directs your life, and you call it destiny. At first glance, the keeper of the repressed shadow looks harmless, often admirable, disciplined, kind, helpful. Yet notice the tells. They can't stand weakness in others, bristle at spontaneity, flinch at raw emotion. They carry a charge but never discharge until they do, and the blast is shattering. They live in non-stop emotional surveillance. Because they forbid themselves to feel, they condemn anyone who does. Because they won't allow mistakes, they lash out at those who err. They become moralistic, demanding, controlling, all desperate moves to keep the unconscious in chains. Jung was blunt. The stronger the persona, the fiercer the shadow, and the fiercer the shadow, the more brutal its eventual outburst. You see this in people who overreact to tiny slights, nurse grudges for years, sabotage relationships with passive-aggressive digs. They're the difficult ones, bitter, critical, mystifying everyone around them. The answer is their unused shadow, unintegrated, unacknowledged, unaccepted. And here's the key: the shadow isn't only darkness. Jung stressed it also hides your denied gifts, your unused creativity, bottled-up strength, latent brilliance. Left in the dark, even that potential turns toxic, poisoning relationships, workspaces, and especially those closest to the keeper. Living beside such a person is like tiptoeing through an emotional minefield. You never know which step will set off an explosion. This repression rarely appears by accident. It's fed by an illusion of moral superiority, a rigid ideal that wields guilt as a weapon of control. Now we meet another figure, the moral controller, the person who not only buries their own urges but also shames you for living yours. Jung called this one of the biggest roadblocks to psychological freedom, the guardian of virtue who hides a swarm of private demons. Not every executioner swings a sword. Some wield crosses, rules, dogmas, and tidy slogans. They claim to act from ethics, righteousness, and morality, yet they trap themselves and everyone near them inside cages of guilt and shame. Jung knew this archetype well. Whenever morality is used as a mask, it turns into one of the most vicious forms of inner repression. The moral controller refuses to face their shadow. Instead, they fling it onto others and then condemn those sins. You've met them. People who point fingers non-stop but never look inward, who set themselves up as moral role models, not because they truly are, but because they're desperate to look superior. Jung observed, "The harder you repress the shadow, the harder you must project it." And that's exactly what the moral controller does. They turn everyone else into the sinner, the deviant, the immoral, so they can ignore their own cravings and contradictions. The danger is greater than with an ordinary manipulator because the moral controller believes they're helping. They honestly think they're correcting, saving, or educating you. That makes their influence even more toxic. It's wrapped in authority, good intentions, and a fake spirituality. Their criticism comes with lines like, "I'm telling you this for your own good," or "Someone has to speak the truth." But their truth is dripping with projections. In Aion, Jung discusses Christ and Antichrist as symbols of wholeness and split-off darkness. The moral controller thinks they live in the light, but refuses to see their shadow, tossing all evil onto others to keep the illusion of purity. This blindness makes them dangerous. They can't see the shades of the human soul. Live near such a person, and you start feeling guilty just for being alive. You sense eyes on you, judging every move. Worse, you begin to judge yourself, repressing normal, human parts of you and bend into ideals that aren't yours. Their morality becomes your prison. Families, religions, rigid workplaces, anywhere obedience passes for virtue, breed this dynamic. Jung warned that heavy moralism blocks individuation. Where strict moral control rules, self-knowledge dies. The extreme moralist doesn't want truth. They want control. When the outer world resists, they tighten their grip on the inner worlds of those around them. Yet the moral controller isn't the only one run by hidden forces. There's another type, far more unstable, volatile, and unpredictable, the complex-ridden individual. While the moralist represses and projects, the complex-ridden person is wholly ruled by unconscious material, reacting like an emotional puppet. Imagine sharing a home with someone who is gentle, attentive, and generous 1 minute, then, without warning, erupts in rage, retreats into punishing silence, or accuses you of things you never even thought about. A compliment mutates into a demand. A light-hearted joke twists into hostility. A warm hug is reread as a threat. No matter how carefully you tread, you're forever stepping onto unstable ground. That's life beside a person ruled by unconscious complexes. For Carl Jung, complexes are autonomous clusters of feeling-laden memories buried in the unconscious. Each cluster carries its own script, voice, and emotion. Formed by trauma, psychic wounds, or unfinished business, these inner splinters can seize the wheel of consciousness in a flash. In Psychological Types and the Ego and the Unconscious, Jung shows how a casual remark in the present can ignite an old abandonment, a forgotten humiliation, a childhood rejection. So the person isn't reacting to now at all, but to echoes only they can hear. The complex-driven individual has no idea an inner fragment just hijacked them. When they lash out in fury, sink into sudden despair, or nurse a wild resentment, they swear they're being reasonable. They're not. They're reliving emotions that were never digested. Worse, this takeover happens in sporadic bursts. Furious meltdowns alternate with spells of tenderness, remorse, or genuine warmth. That push-pull cycle is precisely what makes the relationship confusing and addictive. You tell yourself, they aren't always like this. Sometimes they're wonderful. Those bright moments keep you hooked, hoping they signal real change, only to be followed by another emotional cyclone. In your effort to keep the peace, you begin to shrink. You tiptoe around topics, censor your words, walk on eggshells, praying you won't trigger the sleeping beast. Yet the hard truth is that beast isn't sleeping because of you. It's always awake, prowling beneath the surface, craving any excuse to burst free. Left unrecognized, a complex eventually colonizes the psyche. It thinks for you, feels for you, acts for you. Common takeovers include the complex of inferiority, martyrdom, abandonment, or persecution, each one with its own story, emotion, and demand. The more you mask, pacify, or smooth things over, the more you feed the illusion that chaos can be domesticated. Living near such volatility keeps you in a constant state of vigilance. The present is forever polluted by yesterday's ghosts. Over time, those ghosts seep into you. You question your memory, doubt your feelings, even rewrite events to match their narrative. You're being colonized by someone else's unconscious, and you don't notice until your own center starts to wobble. The most chilling part is this. While the complex-driven personality swings between extremes, there exists another kind of hidden threat. Quiet, calm, and wordless. They never explode, never accuse, never raise their voice. They simply drain your life force until nothing of you remains. Some people don't really want your company. They want your energy. They'll drain it drop by drop, not through open attack, but through quiet demands, chronic victimhood, and neediness, dressed up as love. This is the psychic vampire, the most silent, insidious kind of emotional drain Carl Jung ever cautioned against. He didn't use that nickname, but he mapped the pattern. An unresolved, symbiotic bond that blurs the borders of the self. Jung shows, especially in the ego and the unconscious and Aion, that one of the biggest threats to individuation is a tie where two people stop seeing themselves as separate souls and become psychic extensions of each other. That's exactly where the psychic vampire thrives. They need your constant attention, daily reassurance, permanent availability. Behind that neediness yawns a private emptiness you can never fill. It starts small. You offer support, then more time. Soon you're tolerating emotional abuse because they've had it so hard. Little by little, your own life force bleeds away until you can't tell where they end and you begin. The fatigue isn't only physical, it's existential, as if your spirit is being sipped away hour by hour. Jung spoke of people who, unable to stand up internally, hitch themselves to others like emotional parasites. Harsh as it sounds, the psychic vampire doesn't plan to grow. They plan to be carried. And the true hazard isn't merely exhaustion, it's dissolution of self. You start to feel guilty for wanting space, selfish for craving silence, cold for asking distance. The vampire flips the script. Yesterday's victim becomes today's accuser. You end up living to avert crises, to keep a fragile peace, to sustain a bond that's devouring you from the inside. There's a grim symmetry here. Earlier we met the persona bearer, the moral controller, the complex-ridden soul. Each distorts relationships in its own way, yet none of us is immune. We all house a shadow. Each of us has worn the mask or slipped into projection. Maybe at some point you too have drained someone's energy or lashed out from a buried complex or hidden behind a shining persona. The difference is not in who carries pain, everyone does, but in who has the courage to face it, versus who dumps it on everyone else. Freedom begins the instant you decide to step out of hostage mode and reclaim authority over your own psyche. That starts with naming what you see. So reflect honestly. Have you ever faced a psychic vampire? Someone who left you feeling spun out and hollow after every interaction? Do you catch yourself slipping into moral policing or letting an old complex steer your reactions? Which profile do you recognize most clearly in others? And which do you secretly spot in yourself? Write it down. Speak it aloud. If you'd like, share it below. Your admission might spark someone else's insight. Awareness is the first and strongest kind of freedom. Remember, shedding light on the unconscious lessens its grip. The work is continuous, often uncomfortable, but it is the only way out of this jungle of hidden forces. And every step you take back toward your true center is power no parasite can steal. Subscribe for our next video. Its teachings are essential in helping you take back your power and gain back control of your life.